So I built dozens of applications with AI. Today I want to share with you my learnings of using generateObject function, because it was and is probably the most important function in a lot of our business logic. Today I want to share with you my learnings from using it. There are some quirks that people should know about, and if you are beginner or you're advanced, I think you might find something interesting in here. generateObject allows us to get structured output out of unstructured text, images, or anything that AI can process. We're doing it by defining Zod schema in schema field. So here I've defined Zod schema with questions, which is array. To be honest, I'm not sure if describe works here. I'm pretty sure that it's not doing anything. I like to think about generateObject as extractor of information rather than generator of information, if that makes sense. So what I mean by that is that if you try to create, for example, a large form and you expect it to have like 20 or 30 fields, and you have here complicated schema that it has to adhere, it's not going to do that. It's going to have like a few questions and few sections. What I'm trying to say is that intelligence of the model goes down as complexity of schema is growing. So how to fix that is to separate your logic into two steps. If you're expecting or you want to create a complicated form with many fields, for example, or maybe you want to create a PDF and you have to have many fields there and information there, don't just create it with one step where you are just create a PDF, you describe all the information that has to be there, and you give it a complicated large schema. It's better to separate this into two steps, where first you're going to generate a text version of what you're trying to accomplish, and then use generateObject as extractor of information. It's going to work much better because you're not expecting AI to do everything at once. You're separating logic, basically. Okay, let's talk about reliability of generateObject and structured output as a whole. Because if you're going to expect that AI will behave as you expect all the time, you will be disappointed, to put it lightly. First, what I would recommend you to do is to experiment with different models. What I found for our most use cases, that Gemini models are pretty bad at it because they're doing some stupid shit. For example, it could start inserting empty like new line characters into strings infinitely. It has a lot of problems with markdown tables. It could hallucinate and just creating it infinitely. I don't know how people are using it in production applications, to be honest. It has so many like this quirks and problems. But anyway, so try to play with models. I heard that Mistral is very good for structured outputs, but I haven't tested it. You can play with it, but what I found is OpenAI is probably the most reliable, and for price to reliability ratio, it's pretty good. Not to use GPT-5, but if you're using like Mini or Nano, it's gonna work wonders. Another thing here is to set temperature to as low as possible. So if you're expecting it to extract data and not to like generate content, I would recommend you to set temperature to 0. Previously in version 4 of AI SDK, they were saying here that by default it's set to 0, but then I looked at, and now they're not saying it. I looked at like request, what we are sending, and I saw that temperature is set to undefined. Then I went into the rabbit hole and I looked into their source code of AI SDK, and to be honest, I couldn't find where they're setting default temperature. So I would highly recommend you to set it to as low as possible for your case, especially if you're using generateObject, because high temperature will definitely play a role in hallucinations, especially when it comes to schemas and adhering to schemas. Another thing to prevent like hallucinations of infinite requests, where it's just gonna generate, for example, new lines To prevent that, I highly recommend you to set abort signal. This is a Node.js primitive, and it's gonna cancel this request after 20 seconds. So you can play around with this, see how long it takes on average to complete the request, and set it, because it's gonna save you a lot of money. I'm gonna tell you that. Okay, next we have here max retries. You might think, okay, max retries. How it works is that if your request is gonna fail, it's gonna try to retry it. But it works only for rate limits, for internal server errors, and it won't work if AI fails to adhere to the schema. So if AI, for example, fails on validation part, it won't retry. So what you should keep in mind or implement is some kind of retry function to actually help you do that. So I have here a pretty simple function where you're wrapping your, so let me show you how it works. You wrap your function generateObject with retry call, like this. And what it does is it's gonna retry if it fails. And the reason of the fail wasn't like timeout, aborted, or network. And you can go even further and maybe give errors that AI found or validation found and put it back into AI. But I found that it could be problematic because if AI, for example, hallucinated a bunch, it's gonna hallucinate even further. So it's better to like start fresh and start from the beginning and just retry the call. Another thing to keep in mind is that don't blindly trust outputs, even if they're correct in validation. Because, for example, if your application processes and extracts information from receipts, invoices, it's very important for you to validate values as well. Because if, for example, you have 3 items and you sum them up and they don't match to the total, you're gonna have a hard time, right, in reliability, and you're gonna like retry or try something like this, like redo or I don't know, come up with something. So I think I've covered everything. If you have any other tricks and things that I haven't covered, please let me know in the comments. And if you're interested in this building applications with AI and having reliable AI applications, follow me for more. I'm gonna share many more tips and tricks. Okay, thank you for watching, and until next time.